Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CertiCraft. We are on episode 20 today, which is pretty fucking exciting if you ask me. The CertiCraft is a podcast series where we talk about the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. What's going well, what's not going well, what needs to change to improve some of those things that aren't going well. I'll introduce our three guests here today a little bit later from now. The CertiCraft is hosted by myself, Sami. I'm the CEO of a company called CertiCraft, and we're on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market here in Canada. And our flagship product is a compliance platform that makes all those super tedious compliance requirements far, far easier. The last thing I want to say before introducing our guests is a little land acknowledgement. So I live in Nelson, BC, and where I live here is the traditional and unceded territories of the Sinaiaks people. They used to number in the thousands. Today they number in less than 10, I believe. There's a pretty major scalping program that killed most of those people, and they've had some pretty huge legal battles to retain acknowledgement because the systems in Canada really did not want them to have formal claim on their land. And it's pretty fucked up if you ask me. And there's a lot of things that are pretty fucked up that have happened all across Canada. So I ask each of you to just kind of think and reflect on what's happened where you live. How have the Indigenous folks that have been there for thousands of years, how have they been affected by the settling of this country here? And I think it's always important to just kind of like recognize like how blessed we are to be able to live on this gorgeous land, while people who were here before us were all like just treated like total shit. So with that happy note right there being shared, wait, I got one more housekeeping item before I introduce our guests. We have a chat where I see we already have 6-7 little comments there. If you got any thing you want to share at any point, please do say hi there. If you have questions, and I'm sure there will be questions for our guests as we go through this today, we have a dedicated questions tab. So please go there and ask them. If there's a question you like, please upvote it. And at the end, we'll have 15 minutes to kind of just go through the questions in order of upvotes. And this time, unlike last time, I'll remember to sort it by, in fact, I'll do that right now. I'm going to sort it by upvotes so that I don't forget to do this later. Oh, I don't have that ability until somebody asks a question. Okay, never mind. All right, let's introduce our guests here today. I'd love to introduce to you the lovely Luke, Kayla, and Dan. Two of them are CFOs at craft cannabis companies. One of them is an accountant that works with cannabis companies and also hosts a really awesome processor-oriented webinar series. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the floor to each of them in order. I'll ask each of you to kind of take a minute to introduce yourselves, who you are, what kind of brings you here today, and then we'll get into the discussion. Does that sound good, everybody? Awesome. Sounds great. You're all muted, so you can't respond. Kayla, you unmuted yourself. Why don't you go first?
Sure thing. I'm Kayla. I'm a CFO at Cake and Caviar and Habitat Life. I mean, CFO these days in a craft is not really a CFO job. You're doing a lot of everything, but been there for 2 years now. We do aquaponics, and we have organic salmon and organic weed that comes out of our facility.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla. Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Go for it.
All right. Thanks, Sami. I'm Dan Mallett from Alberta Bud. I'm the CFO over there. We were the first Alberta micro cultivation and micro processing license recipients. So we're based in Edmonton in a converted carpet warehouse. We've got some beautiful flower rooms, double deckers, and our two main strains that we've been putting out that people just love is the Slurface and Uppercut Punch, which are both, our own strains that our growers brought in. And man, every crop just keeps getting better and better. Before Bud, I had an accounting firm and an accounting background, but that was a second career from the military. So I've been all over the map, and I just love this industry with just so much energy and diversity and just like what people's backgrounds are and what they bring to the table. It's just fun every day.
And Dan, were you guys the first micro that was licensed in Alberta?
Well, dual micro.
Dual micro.
Like the cultivation and processing.
Okay.
So I don't think we were the first micro period.
You guys are pretty early on, though. That's why I asked, because I remember you guys were one of our very first customers a long time ago.
Yeah,
where there weren't that many micros anywhere in the country.
We got our license in September 2012. 2020.
Okay, so I'm misremembering then because we had people in 2017. Anyway, sorry to derail the conversation a bit there.
No problem.
Thanks for the intro, Luke. Do you wanna introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Luke Biles here, coming at you from Victoria, the M&P office. I'm a partner here in our private enterprise group. I don't do a ton with the public guys, but I definitely interface with them on certain levels. I also acknowledge and respect that I'm speaking to you from the unceded territories of the Lekwungen people, on whose land I live and work on today. And I recognize the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue. So yeah, I work with a lot of private companies, or I interface with a lot of private companies. We'll probably get into why I don't work with a ton of them during this, but I'm really happy to be here. I actually got all my cannabis experience working as employee number 4 at Rubicon Organics, which is the owners of the Simply Bear brand, and 1964, which is their Quebec brand, and Homestead, which is their kind of premium minus brand. And I really like the products that they've put out. So I started there as financial controller, but like Kayla said, you got to wear every hat. So I managed our extraction facility. I was in purchasing, looking at what's on the market and bringing it in house to see if we could do anything with it. All that stuff. IT guy, apparently, HR, the whole works. We did it at Rubicon with a really bootstrap team, and now it's awesome to see that they've grown into a really good cannabis producer processor. And I'm happy to be here, Sammy. I'm super happy to be here.
I'm happy you're here too, and you bring that energy. That's awesome to see those smiles and those positive vibes. So I appreciate you, Luke.
Thanks, buddy.
I also really like Rubicon. They actually they gave us a lot of time back in 2018 when we were first starting out with this idea. They were using, I won't say they really didn't like the software they're using at the time, and they gave us dozens, like Tyler and Rachel especially gave us so many hours helping us design what they wish they had, and they played a pretty big role in our user experience coming together. We had a few companies like that. Whistler Medical also gave us a lot of their time to help us design this system. So definitely have a special place in my heart for that team.
Mm-hmm.
Love
Awesome.
to hear that.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for being here today, audience members, as you have probably picked up on if you haven't already from the title and the introductions. Everybody here has their hands in the world of accounting in some kind of way and in cannabis in some kind of way. So, the way this podcast works is we always give our guests the opportunity to kind of take this conversation in whatever direction they want, but generally it tends to be thematically tilted towards whatever perspective they bring from their experience. So my expectation today is that we'll talk a lot about things related to tax and accounting and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it all depends on what Dan, Luke, and Kayla want to share. So I guess we'll start off with our first question that we tend to ask in this discussion here, which is, what do you guys feel is going pretty well in the craft cannabis industry?
In craft?
I think there's a lot of energy and a lot of entrepreneurs wanting to get in, and a lot of people willing to take a big risk getting into this new industry, even knowing the challenges. They might not know what they are, they just know there's a lot of challenges, and yet they're still willing to jump in head first and give her as much as they can. That's going well.
Yeah, I'd say, craft cannabis, as far as its position in the market, I think is fairly strong right now. Folks out there like Dunn and other guys like Alberta Bud and Habitat, they've got really strong product offerings that are getting great reviews. So it's picking up, and it's good to see that we can compete on the craft scale with everything else that's out there. The margins might not be what you want, but
we'll get into that maybe not. I think the sense of community that's coming around is pretty cool. The quality of product, obviously. I just responded to a guy on Twitter who loved him to death, and he's always all over all the medical sites trying everything, and he's super stoked on it. And it's so great to see that you can buy a bunch of stuff and be stoked on a bunch of the ones that you get, versus the opposite where it's like, okay, which one was the one I'd buy again? So I think that kind of sentiment is really cool. And to be acknowledged at this point, just because I think it's been a long time to get here, and it's all kind of, it's turning around. It's very cool to see.
Kayla, can you call him out? Is it Doug?
Is it Doug? It's not Doug. It's oh, you're gonna put me on the spot.
Leaf
Cap. It's Cap.
Oh, yeah. Shoot, what's his name? I'm like logging into my Twitter right now.
Well, while you do that, Luke, that's pretty cool, and I totally agree with you. Like, the community has been a huge aspect of why we're focusing on craft with CertiCraft. Like, when we started out, we created things that are great for growers. Like, we worked with a few different teams in addition to Rubicon and Whistler that I mentioned earlier, where their grow teams really helped us and loved what we were doing. And then we started talking to higher up the corporate ladder, so to speak, to actually start having their companies use us. And what we found with some of those bigger companies was that, like, once you got outside of the production team, like, they no longer cared about anything but money and profit margins and how they could take advantage of you, and it just became this, like, just all the business stereotypes from, like, people who don't really have strong ethical systems, and it just sucked. And so we made a decision pretty early on. We were like, fuck this is not what we want to help. We don't want to help big giant soulless corporations make more money. That's not our interest. Let's just focus on craft, because everybody in the craft industry is awesome, and we would rather help those people that are legitimately struggling and don't have a good solution that's affordable. Like, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but as a result of CertiCraft, all of the different competitors that we have, like, slashed their prices by like 80% or something. When we came on the market, everything else was like $50,000 plus a year. And then we introduced something that was like 10% of that. And everybody else was like, okay, we can't keep these prices up because there's a huge disconnect here. And like within 6 to 8 months or so, everybody else had like introduced micro pricing that was still a lot more expensive than what we had. But that's something I feel proud of. Even if all else fails, like, at least we get made everything a lot more affordable and accessible.
I'd like to hear that story happen with the banks.
That's an industry I don't want to enter.
It's funny because, you know, if the regulations didn't hand the keys over super early to the big corps, you know, craft is what it would be, right? It would be all of these legacy growers with tons of experience and tons of genetics bringing really exciting stuff to the market. And instead we've got warehouses and gigantic greenhouses and indoor grows full of powdery mildew. Yeah. You know, and then you know, the craft folks like Dan and Kayla, who are doing really excellent work out there, but are still stymied by you know, cost cuts and
you're just guilty by association.
Yeah.
Like, if one group has a bad experience, they just extrapolate to every grower. They say, oh, one craft grower sold us some stuff and it was, you know, showed up and the microbials was not passable, and so the next craft person they speak to, that's how they start their conversations, and the dialogue is under an assumption that we're all the same, and, you know, it's just not the case. But it comes from a lot of problems with, well, if you don't have financing to really finish your project the way you envisioned from day zero, quality is probably going to suffer. Sorry, I'm unmuting and unmuting as the background noise.
We appreciate it, man.
And just to add to that point, Dan, like, even if you do like an amazing job with everything, like in episode 19, the last episode, we talked about kind of the distribution system that exists in BC, which is going to be fair. It's fairly comparable to what most of the provinces are doing. And, you know, here in their warehouses, they're not actually keeping things at a temperature that keeps the cannabis at keeps it fresh. And so as soon as it enters a distributor, then you're ruining
warehouse.
But honestly, like, if something is sitting in a warehouse for 3 months and it's not at 4 degrees Celsius, it's at room temperature, well, guess what? It's degrading all that time. If there's like little tiny spores that like would not fail any kind of microbial test, well, after 3 months, those things are going to actually become a lot more apparent in that cannabis. So there's all these things.
Isn't there a lot of irony that the provincial distributors, they control the liquor, which would mean they probably have some refrigerated warehouses for all the beer?
What? No, man. BC just got cold zones like a year ago.
Oh my God.
Whatever that was, right? Like, couldn't even sell cold beer. You know, so I don't think the liquor distribution has freezers. I think it's piss warm.
So we can all agree
damn
the government should
expensive
not
too.
be in the business of business.
Yeah. Are you talking about the markups that they charge, Kayla, when you say it's damn expensive, or something different?
Just in general, I mean, they've got their fees. I think everybody in this industry is seeing a lot of struggle in their own ways because everyone's trying to figure it out. But refrigerating, I'm sure that's the last thing on their mind to add to the electricity bills, even though ours are higher probably. But
yeah.
I think another good thing, if we're still on the topic of good stuff happening, it's a step in the right direction. I think everybody was real excited about Farmgate until, and it's like, okay, we're moving there. We might get there. So that would be really cool if it was what we needed. Right?
Yeah.
I think on that point, like the teams that Sammy's putting together is huge to see, because once you get those groups together and they've got a crew that's been in the industry for a long time, diverse experience, and can pull things together for the government to look at, it's going to be a lot easier to do this sort of stuff. I think everybody was so busy with their own stuff, and you kind of get the first in that really want to be that organization to help. But at the end of the day, it's got to be the people that have gone through it and been in the industry. So that's now kind of straightened out as well, having people that have been through a lot of stuff in the legal space with the federal licensing stuff, and then bringing those people to the table creates a new opportunity for us to have that dialogue be a little bit more open, I think.
And I just want to clarify that I am a founding member of the Kootenay Cannabis Economic Development Council, but it was not my brainchild. It's Shannon Ross, who was part of the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative at Community Futures, that really spearheaded that thing. She thought it was a very critical thing that our region needed, and put it together. So I did not put it together, but I appreciate the sentiment.
Sorry, are you
Teams
talking
in
about
general.
the Chamber of Commerce report that came out a couple weeks ago too?
I've no idea.
Am I talking about that?
Are you talking about the thing where like the Chamber of Commerce has two different cannabis companies that are part of it, and they're both giant corporations and misrepresent a lot I think around what the cannabis industry actually needs because they are only sharing it from the giant enterprise perspective? Is that what you're talking about?
Maybe. I hope not. But I think there were other companies that were on board there, and some big ones, but that didn't necessarily have their names on it. But just to see, the business side of, BC or Canada, or even smaller, here on the island in Victoria and Cowichan, like the Chamber of Commerce is pushing forward and trying to help cannabis, participants, because they recognize that there is an economic benefit for them, more jobs, more spending money in their towns, in their cities, So any push, I think, from those people that historically hold the keys to business, maybe not any push, but at least a push in the right direction.
That's in alignment with what the actual needs of the industry are.
You got it, man.
Totally. Consistently.
Yeah. What you're talking about is different than what I'm talking about is something different, not
Okay.
Not the same
thing. Cool.
So maybe Luke, you brought up the Chamber of Commerce. Can you maybe give those of us in the audience, myself included, who maybe aren't so familiar with what the Chamber of Commerce actually does? Like, what is that organization, and why? What is their mission, and how are they interfacing with the cannabis industry in this kind of way?
Good thing I'm on their website right now. But they call themselves the voice of BC business. So it's not lobbying per se, but it's a very large collection of businesses in specific geographic areas. So you generally have one for your town or area. Then you've got the provincial one, and then there's actually one for Canada too. And so they tend to focus on what industries are around us that are important and that we need to support. So, here on the island, especially, once you get out to Duncan in that area, forestry is a big deal. So like there's a lot of forestry focus, but at the same time, there's a lot of focus on normal small business in town, like retailers, like people who are starting new small ventures, little consultant things like that. They do things like host mixers. You talk about community and bringing community to cannabis. They do a very, very similar style thing to what I do with processors, to what you're doing right now. It tends to be a way more diverse selection of business than really focus on one area, but you know, they see the need, and it's people like, you know, Sarah Campbell and the House of the Great Gardener, or whatever they're calling themselves now that they're licensed.
That is their name.
Yeah. So
wait, no, sorry. Great Gardener Farms. That's
Great
their
Gardener
name.
Farms. There you go. Yeah. You know, it's because of people like that who go to the chamber and like work with them and push for these things, and then introduce the chamber to community futures, right?
Yeah.
And make that connection, and continue to build on those relationships. You know, it's not, you know, there are people behind the scenes here who are pushing these things forward and whatnot.
I'm glad you're bringing that up. I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce here in Nelson, mostly for their health benefits. That's kind of that's the main reason that I joined.
Well, there you go. Exactly.
But I hadn't ever considered that they might be a force for good for our industry, because I'm glad you're mentioning that. I'll definitely make a point to go talk to them and get a sense of if they are already doing things, because Community Futures is super active here in Nelson, and I'm betting you that they've already talked to the Chamber of Commerce. But that's a great place to go see if you can push some levers and make things better for the industry here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, look, if the BC government, if Trudeau, if the people who have Health Canada aren't listening and making changes now, then convincing the people who generally have a seat at those tables to get on your side is not a bad idea.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Anything else good?
We did shift for a while to not so good, and then came back to good. Anything else at all that's good or bad that you guys think is relevant to bring up in this conversation?
There's a lot of struggle. The financing piece is really bad. The B2B sales, especially as craft, is really bad. The big companies that you have to deal with are very aggressive and have a divide and conquer attitude to their purchasing power, and that's, you know, it's not a recipe for success for any craft grower with the way things are right now to have to do B2B wholesaling deals. They're garbage.
With your competitors.
I'm saying this like as if you only have a cultivation license and you have to send it to someone else for processing.
And that's what I mean, that a lot of those bigger brands that have the capacity to actually buy your product, they are your competitors. So like
they get to dictate the price.
Yeah.
Because they can.
Yeah.
Everything, right? The packaging, you got a baby over there, Dan?
No, it's Luke actually. You might not notice
Luke.
it. I saw what you did, Luke. Don't you worry. Your silliness is not unnoticed here.
Never. I love it. I think even just packaging and everything, right? Once it's out that door, you have no control. Even as a micro who has a branded market, Cake and Caviar. Oh, there we go.
Do you want to say hi?
Yeah. Bring them up.
Can you say hi, everybody?
What do you think about the industry your dad is in?
Say hi, everybody.
Hi.
Your dad's a rock star.
Yeah. You guys get dogs, I get a kid.
I'll stick with the dog too for a bit. But yeah, I think once it's out that door, it's scary as a micro, right? Even with a brand, we have our processing license at Cake and Caviar, but we have great partners who can actually do it cheaper than we can because they're buying, the jars at much higher quantities and things like that. So we've decided to stick with them, but and the sales aspect on top of it. So at times with pre-rolls and sales, we're dealing with two companies. And even on the money side coming back, it's got to hit two bank accounts before it comes back. It's such a process for the little guys for sure. So I can't imagine doing wholesale as a micro, to be honest with you.
Prices aside, the terms are so predatory with, like, okay, they want to buy our stuff. They like the strain. They want it badly. Like all the conversations until the contract comes out is so positive. And then you get offered this thing with a gun to your head. Like they know you have to sell because you have bills to pay and lending is so scarce. You get offered a crap price. And then they have, generally, we've seen both ends of the spectrum, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about what's bad with things going on. You'll get these offers where the QA process is just, it isn't even reasonable. Everything is stacked in the buyer's favor, including when they decide that they get to pay you. They set the terms of how they'll accept it, and it's an open-ended date. They can sit on your stuff as long as they want, and they won't agree to pay until they've accepted it. I'm like, so if you get to decide when you accept it and you don't have to pay until you've accepted it, why should I sell to you? Because I'll never get paid. And they just look at you blankly like, well, do you want to sell or not? It feels like dealing with oil and gas companies here in Alberta. You know, they say, yeah, you know, we said 30 days, but if you want to get paid, we'll pay you now. We just won't do business with you again. Like, wow, that's nasty.
Yeah. The kind of best case scenarios that I've seen out there are really, really deep partnerships between microcultivators and specific processors. And it's like, you know what, or specific cultivators, sorry. If you want to grow cannabis as a micro, you know, but you don't have, let's just say you got your micro license and great, you know, you got seeds in the ground or whatever you're doing over there, and then you've got flower. Like, I feel like you've gone too far then. Like, I feel like before you know, start growing anything, the best case scenario is to go to people, go to those processors, go to the brands and say, look, what do you need? And because all I want to do is grow good weed. It doesn't have to be my strain or like, you know, what I want it to be. But having a really deep partnership is where I've seen the most success. Of course, that's not easy to find, right? And it's extremely difficult and extremely rare, but it's kind of the best case scenario, right? Like, find a buyer for your product before you even start making your product. Because if you grow something and it's a strain that Black Cherry Punch, remember last year, right? Like, everybody was making Black Cherry Punch, and then nobody was buying the Black Cherry Punch. LDB went, nah, we've got like 7 SKUs of this. Why do we want more? And it's like, you know, you need to really try and have that foresight and have a system set up for yourself. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, one of the other issues is on like the strain side of things is they'll want your strain, but then they have their own issues with, well, they don't really want to list a specific strain on a prevent, like OCS, for example. Like, if you got someone trying to buy from Ontario and they want your stuff and they want to list it, be first to the market with some crazy strain from out west that people want, but they also don't want to back themselves into a corner by buying a strain that is proprietary to 1 or 2 craft growers, because they can't really guarantee their own supply, and these larger LPs are quite bureaucratic and have a lot of resources to plan their processing and packaging, and they want to make sure that they aren't going to have supply chain issues getting the products. So they'll blend, they'll do this and that, and at the end of the day, it just means, well, the craft product that's growing isn't really what's landing on the shelves. It's getting renamed or rebranded or white labeled something. And so we can tell people, they're like, hey, where do we find Alberta Bud? And we say, well, there's a lot of it in Ontario, but you'll never find it because we don't know what it's called. Our stuff's everywhere. We have no idea where to find it. And in Alberta, people are like, well, where can we buy your stuff? I'm like, well, we don't have a store yet. That's a process, but I don't know where our stuff is. I can't tell you. There's no way for me to see where AGLC has sold our inventory. You kind of have to phone stores up. And even then, because we're not the processor, you know, if you search for Alberta Bud, you'll never find us. We're a brand under someone else. It's so hard.
So screwed up that you, as a producer, can't know where your product ended up. That's like a basic aspect of a supply chain. Where did your stuff go?
There's software's coming together now. So there's software's coming together now where retailers can sign up for free on them and get details on drops, on COAs, on things like that. Canometrics is an example. So people are starting to do that. And then once they scan those barcodes into their system, they only have a couple of POS systems in it right now, but it automatically tells you who sold what at what store. So things like that are starting to come around, but it's been difficult even to this day where, yes, I'm the same thing, calling up the stores in Kelowna to see where our product is and all that kind of stuff. But it's good to see that people are finally figuring it out. And I think we've all felt the issues of that. Here goes my Italian hand. All the issues of that, and that'll come out a lot when I'm talking about the weed industry. But you know, having people like that are putting these platforms together to rally the troops, and it's going to take all of us doing it, because as we all know, we don't have the government systems that are standardizing this and giving us this data. So it comes to those third parties and us participating with them. So it's cool. It's cool to see that start, but definitely a long way to go. That's for damn sure.
It's starting, and because of our recent work creating a retail store to, definitively say, it's like, you want Alberta Bud, you go to our store, you go to our Farmgate website whenever that's fully up and running. But the challenge is these POS systems. We spoke to quite a few of them, and they are really touting that that supply side. Like, where would you find your stuff? Well, who's buying it? What store is it in? Well, they want to sell that to the growers. They want to sell that information. It's like, hey, do you want to know where your stuff is? Pay us. So it's just solving one problem by creating a new one.
Yeah,
and I get it.
As if the budgets exist in the craft cannabis industry.
Yeah, exactly. You're squeezed at every point. If you're craft and a small grower, everyone's terms are you pay us up front, and everyone who you sell to says that we'll pay you when we feel like it. So you're just left in the middle, like, well, I'll figure it out. But yeah, like I understand, like Tech and Sami, I'm sure, can attest to the fact that it's very expensive to develop. So you want to get paid for what you make, but what's fair? And I know they want to do some like craft oriented things, make it cheaper for the craft people, but it's still not zero.
We still can't afford it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was excited about it, couldn't pull the lever. So just shows you everyone's running lean. And I think a lot of people in every aspect of the industry are, and that's the problem. Something's got to give, whether it's, the process to get to market's a little bit easier. That takes away some of these supply chain issues, whether it's fees cut on some parts. But if everyone's struggling, then we all have a problem. That's, I think, been the most crazy thing to me, being on the finance side. And I started with Valens. I built Valens, one of the first employees there. So I was there for a couple of years before I went back to Habitat.
And what is Valens? Is that like what a bigger licensed
the
producer?
Valens company?
They're big boys.
The Valens company. It's a big LP, based out of Kelowna. Yeah, public company. But mostly extraction, white label, and brands and things like that now, third-party services. But so got a good look at, what it's like to be in one of those companies in the good days and in the bad days. And, they all struggle too. But for craft, now that whole hype bubble's gone, and, as Dan was saying, and like we're saying, that money's dried up, you literally have to be ready and set for a rainy day, or you're absolutely screwed. I was lucky enough to raise $1 million in 2020 to redo our cultivation facility, to kind of do the next step of R&D for us. But that I really had that agriculture lever to lean on during that whole thing, because our system can be utilized in just general ag as well. But I can't imagine having tried to do that in 2020, needing it. No, it was an older warehouse. We really wanted to step it up, and there's just that help's just not there. But you just have to be diligent, and you gotta work your own magic to get what you need. That's for damn sure. To your point, Dan, a lot of people will try and take you for what you're worth, and so there's a lot of no's and there's a lot of negotiation. But if you stand by your brand, you create something that's worth something. You got to stand by that and fight for what you deserve. So
yeah,
but it's hard.
Sorry,
I just said, but it's hard.
Okay, since you've muted yourself, I've got a question for you guys here. There's a three-way confusion going on there. Apologies for that. The sense that I'm getting from this conversation, and the sense that I've gotten a bunch before, and I kind of want to just like share this sense with you guys and see what you think about it, is that one of the big issues that's endemic to our industry is that a lot of the like government-oriented services, and not just other services in general, that interact with this industry, have this false assumption that everybody is making cash. It's just flush with money in this cannabis industry.
That's not their first assumption. That's not their first assumption.
It
the first
was.
assumption is if you weren't a criminal, you might be. and so there's such in-depth security stuff, but like the banks treat you the same way, with this assumption that it doesn't matter that if I go to the bank with my accounting firm hat on, they bend over backwards, falling over each other, trying to lend me money at amazing terms. I walk out the door, put on my green hat, and they lock it.
Yeah,
that's it in a nutshell. Cash is king more than ever in this industry. Way more cash than you ever thought you'd ever need. You need to have, because you just don't know when you're going to get shorted on an invoice, have things delayed, we've seen the past 6 months, everything's gone up. 50% insurance increases year over year over year. Like if you're expecting financing, don't. If you have to lease stuff, expect double-digit rates. Expect double-digit rates for anything. Expect not to have a credit card. Zero credit. Like if you get a bank account, call it a good day.
Call it a good day. Yeah, that's a success. That's a win.
So in your opinion, Dan, you're saying that all of this stems from stigma. Because to me, like kind of my assumption was all the stuff that you're describing, it stemmed more from like, oh, everybody's making a lot of money in cannabis, so we're gonna have our cut, and everybody has that attitude, and then that compounds when you have like 3 different levels of government, like 4 different services, all kind of with that attitude. But I could also
pushed
see
a few buttons at the banks, and I'm not going to name names. They all have the same common issues with lending to cannabis. The first big one was, if they have any American presence, there'll be no cannabis customers.
Yeah.
Because even though it's a Canadian bank, Canadian laws, doesn't matter. The American masters must be satisfied with who the Canadian banks are doing business with. The other issue is, and I don't know any specifics on it, just a few good banking contacts said they made a lot of bad bets leading up to and right after legalization.
Yeah.
And the last couple of years, anyone who's starting out gets to pay that price.
So like on a personal level, they made bad bets, like in terms of like putting money into public companies or like loans, or what do you mean?
Well,
they were late to the game, right? They held off, and then from there, they went hard into it in 2019, and then that's when everything started to bust, especially in the public companies. So they all got absolutely, pardon my French, fucked. Like I'm talking,
they did
hundreds of millions of dollars landed and never, expecting to see it back because it was such a big shift for them. So it became a big thing for sure. And now fees are still terrible. Like I think we pay $6,000 a year just to have a bank account because we're cannabis.
And of course, they don't recognize the fact that all these pubcos that have zero interest in anything but profit and have zero understanding of how to grow good quality cannabis that then creates real value for their companies is completely different from the craft cannabis industry, where people have the opposite attitudes. Like, we want to grow the best shit possible. And
there's a government-owned bank in Alberta. There's only one, 3 letters long, starts with an A, and they talk a lot of lip service about how they're very cannabis friendly. They'll give you a bank account, a standard small business bank account, regular fees, which is fantastic. But if you want credit, the answer is no. Their credit team is just, it's a hard no matter what, no credit, which means no line of credit, no credit cards, nothing. And, there's more to share on that story because it's just insane. But when we asked them about lending, first it was, well, get your license. Then it was, show us positive cash flow. Then it was 3 months of positive. Now it's 6 months of positive. You're like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Like, it just sounds like you'll lend when I no longer need a loan. So are you a bank or what?
Sorry to interrupt you, Dan. Whatever you do, do not take more than 50 shareholders and become a reporting issuer, because now you're on the DNO side, which the insurance.
What does DNO side mean?
Directors and officers insurance. I'm not even going to say the number, but let's just say it's like it nears six figures for the annual insurance. So if you need a board, if that's in your business plan and you require that, do not take money from more than 50 people, because then you become a reporting issuer and you've got audits every year. You've got all of these additional fees and all the headaches of a public company, not as one, which I love.
Another gotcha is, if you're taking investors, friends and family or acquaintances, even if you're under that 50 cap, you got to start thinking about a key investor reporting to Health Canada. And you could sidestep that by giving non-voting shares, but still it's a completely arbitrary thing. Like, the way they just sent out some guidance yesterday or today, and I read it, I was like, nothing's changed. If they feel like someone's a key investor, they can drum up a reason why they're a key investor. So you just have to report everyone who can vote in any way. A single share of 100,000 votes apparently is control in the eyes of Health Canada's key investor report.
And so then do they have to go through security clearance and all that?
No, it's just paperwork, but it's questions and hassle.
Okay.
Data.
So it just takes time essentially, and it's annoying. Is what
it's more time that for compliance work. and it's a full-time job to begin with, and
Yeah.
you step way back and you say, how come legal cannabis is so much more expensive than black market stuff to produce? It's because the all-in costs, like you need to have a QA person, you need to have an accounting team, you need to have a salesperson. It's like black market, it's all in one. What's the QA? Seems good.
Yeah, that's a fact. That is a fact.
I love that.
And yet cash flow seems to run the same way though. Down.
Yeah.
So we're nearing the end of our usual allotted time here, and I definitely want to touch on the excise regime before we wrap this up. Before we go there, is there anything else that you guys think is important to talk about in this conversation here?
I just want to touch on what our gent said here about the cash flowing aspect of things. As someone who's been, bridging cash gaps for many years in both public and private sector, micro especially, when it's really tough to get funding in this day and age, it's so important to have a proper reserve and realize that, for example, with us, it could be with the fact that we process out of house and we have a sales license out of house that we're utilizing right now in our supply chain. That takes so much time. So if you're harvesting something, it could be 100 days before you get paid. So there's all of this leeway that you've got to understand. You've got to understand the terms of who's paying you. As Dan said, if they're only paying you every Friday, we really, I felt like I was in situations where I'm like waiting for this payment to come in and I can't wait till Friday. And you just don't want that feeling. So I think cash flow is a super huge thing to be as conservative as possible with, because you ultimately, like I said, as a micro, you have very little control. And with, for example, BCLDB now, a lot of the times if it's a new SKU, they're only going to take 80 cases. And if that doesn't do well, then they're not going to be ordering again. And so those inventories can pile up. And it's something that I think as a micro, every move is a money move, whether it's something that doesn't happen for you or it's something that you do. And I think cash flow from an accounting perspective is number uno. So I just wanted to put that out there for folks.
Thanks for that sage
And
advice.
if you ever need someone to talk to, hit me up. I'm on everything, all the platforms.
If I tag along at the tail end of that, about micros and cash flow and even LPs and cash flow, I mentioned at the beginning, like I don't do not a ton of work with cannabis companies. I interface with them, I call them, I chat with them, I answer questions and all of that stuff. But as far as like filing tax returns, it's very few and far between, because they look at it and they go, all right, if I've got, 2 to 5 grand sitting around, am I going to pay to file a tax return when I don't have to pay tax? Am I going to pay a bookkeeper even? Right here we've got Dan and Kayla, really, really great CFOs and I guess CPAs, right? 90% of craft out there don't even have bookkeepers. They have no tracking. And I get it when the question is, do we put food on the table or do we file a tax return? There's a correct answer there. I understand that, but the cost of getting caught up down the road is exponential.
There are reasons to do that. I mean, you're just doing yourself a favor. Well, one, because you can actually see what you're spending money on, because we know that when cash is tight, you're just pulling out cards from your personal wallet to pay for stuff. So you need to keep track of that, or else you lose track of it.
Yep.
And it's
family affair.
It's very difficult to get caught up and figure out what you spent money on, even weeks after you spent it.
Yeah.
And then you finally find someone who is willing to work with you on the lending side, and the question will come up: have you filed everything? Have you paid your GST? Well, it's easy when everything's going to be a refund until you sell something, but you got to deal with GST. If you've been filing refund after refund, they're going to want support. And if you haven't done the bookkeeping, you're going to have it rejected, and you just lost all your ITCs, thousands and thousands. All your construction costs take 5+% depending on where you are, and it's going to hurt, because that might be your payroll.
Michael makes a great point here. The interest on his taxes is the cheapest loan he's had, and makes perfect sense. CRA charges 5%. That's way cheaper than any debt you're going to get from a bank on a credit card or anything like that.
But if you're trying to get like a BBC loan and you don't have your payroll caught up or your GST caught up, they're going to say, too risky, off you go.
Yeah, or even financial statements, notice of assessment. I mean, you're going to be at the 11th hour with a lender, and they're going to be like, oh, okay, let's see the financials and this and that, and all of a sudden it's a mad dash with somebody like me to get it done. And I'm not going to lie, capacity in professional services, it's more than, I mean, yeah, there's a dollar value there, but there's a capacity issue in professional services all across Canada. Try and call a lawyer and have them pick up the phone right away. Try and call an accountant and have them pick up the phone right away. Like, we can't stop at the drop of a hat and help immediately. We need time. We need to be ready and prepared.
So if resources are tight, and this is any business, especially small businesses with entrepreneurs, you know, the time of year where they finally get around to catching up on this annoying accounting and tax and compliance work is when the letters, the brown envelopes from the government have reached a sufficient height on the desk, and then the shoeboxes of receipts come out, and you know that those are the worst clients. Like having an accounting firm, that's the worst. And so then not only are you having a hard time finding someone who will work with you because they are uncertain if they're going to get paid, they also know they're going to walk into just a disaster job that they don't really want to do. So you're not going to have a good relationship right off the get-go. It's just everything snowballs. It's just like you just feel why poverty really sucks. Everything is just harder when it doesn't need to be, and it's like being poor without being poor.
Yeah.
And it's taught me a lot.
Yeah, I think finding a bookkeeper of some capacity, even if it's someone who can just do your entries at the end of the month, just reconciling your cash, your statements and things like that, it makes a huge difference. And you can't budget, you can't cash flow without it. So you want to know what you're spending your money on. You want to be able to create budgets. There's ways to get budgets online, and then there's seminars and there's things like that, or you can get someone to help you. But I think from a cash perspective, you've got to give a little to get anything out of this industry, and having that unlock. I am grateful enough to be a CPA CA for my company and have breadth of experience to be able to do it all. But at the same time, I'm doing it 5 other jobs. But it's important to do it. And even when I'm not caught up as a chartered accountant, I'm still pulling my own hair out and then making my accountants mad on the other end at MMP, actually. So it is important to keep that up, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. You got to do it with CRA reporting and things like that anyway, with inventory and such. So, it's just one extra thing at the end of the month. You schedule it out. You got to do it though, or get someone to do it. There's always great bookkeepers. That's a lie. Bookkeepers.
Yeah.
Good bookkeepers are hard to find, but there's always bookkeepers reaching out, and it's just about finding that one that jives with you and knows what your business needs. But it's like a therapist. It's worth finding the one that is killer, because otherwise you're just it's causing more work than it is. But it's super important.
Any advice around that? It's that QuickBooks and Xero link to bank accounts, and it's super efficient to do your accounting nowadays. You're not sitting around with bank statements too much, and it's relatively affordable. So like Kayla said, like maybe don't file your corporate tax return. That's okay, but at least get the bookkeeping done so that 3 years from now, when you need that stuff, you've got the bookkeeping ready to go. And that includes your personal stuff too, because we all know folks are out there buying stuff on their personal credit cards for the business. Do not lose track of that. That is dollar for dollar loss. If you go out and spend $500 on something and you forget about it, that's $500 you're not getting back. And there's a tax deduction there that you're also not getting if it's just toast. So being on top of at least the bookkeeping and doing something like QuickBooks or Xero, and just how they integrate. And I don't work for them, dude. I don't get any kickback. It's just what I'm seeing up until like the last 3 years. It's all, everybody's been sage. Nowadays, QuickBooks and Xero are just, all I'm saying is they're taking the lead.
I'll plug Xero all day long. I've worked with them quite extensively and closely since 5 years or so. It in my opinion, it's a superior product. It's just easier. And for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, if they're trying to do the DIY owner bookkeeper thing, zero is just better for a zero experience person. And when people say, what's the difference? Because at the end of the day, they do the same thing-ish. Zero is just easier to not make mistakes. And if you do, a professional has background tools that they can fix them way quicker than you ever will as like the owner operator. So, you know, but they both
key
work.
info.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then I think if, let's say you're like doing really good out there and you're the craft folks who've got the bookkeeper and you've got the zero and you're doing all your accounting and stuff, don't forget about inventory, especially if you've got real reporting to do. If you think at some point you're going to need an audit or a review or something like that, let's say you're a bigger company, if you don't figure out how to, you know, record and recognize your inventory over time early on, again, it's a huge cash outlay to get caught up. It's gonna be
on the monthly reporting. CRA and Health Canada do not talk to each other. Within CRA, the reviewers don't have access to your actual filings. So we had a review and the guy's like, can you send me all your filings? I'm like, you don't have them? He said, no. No, why would I? I'm like, it's your CRA. So then I said, well, can't you pull my Health Canada ones? He goes, oh, absolutely not. So I was like, why do I have to file these monthly if the people who review them can't even see them? Like, what's happening with them? And so when you get the review, they want all your Health Canada filings. They want your CRA filings. They want to see all the batch records and everything. And then they're going to look at your month, like your January Health Canada and your January CRA, and they're going to say, they don't add up. So in preparing your reports, you also have to
different
do
categories. The categories don't match in the two different reports.
So they want them reconciled back to each other. How does one relate to the other? Show that the opening this month matches closing last month for every category. I'm like, you guys need to have a better system.
So here's just a tip for anybody listening to this. If an auditor is telling you to do that, tell them to fuck off in nicer words, because that's their job. They're just trying to get you to do their job for them. And you really should not need to be doing any of this work for them. If you have filed your reports and if you have documents that prove that you have done everything by the books, that's all they need. It is their job to go through that documentation. And
tell anyone to do that. Like, yeah, be aggressive, but at the end of the day,
you said in nicer words.
I said in nicer words. Yeah. No, we've had this experience a lot because we've had like. You know, for us, we really care about customer service at CertiCraft, and we've had quite a few companies who are freaking out because their auditors at the CRA specifically, it's always a CRA, is telling them, oh, we need you to create these spreadsheets because we don't like these PDF records that are, because our system, what it generates is exactly what Part 11 of the cannabis records regulations, the record keeping part, requires. And so we create this PDF records that just has everything Health Canada requires by law. And that is sufficient for the CRA. And what an auditor is supposed to do is they're supposed to take whatever valid records you have and look through that to make sure that it matches the reports that our system generates. And of course, most people don't feel comfortable telling an auditor, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't have to. And thankfully, a lot of our customers reach out to us to ask us when those kind of things come up. And what I typically do is I just jump on a call with them and the auditor and just explain to them very kindly, hey, just so you know, that's not our customer's job. You guys have everything that's legally required. They already have a beyond full-time job here right now. You need to go through it yourself. If you have any problems with that, here is your boss, whose information I have. Go talk to them, and they'll tell you that you don't have to do this. And it's inevitably they've kind of changed their tune, and just because what they're used to in other industries, you know, they're working with QuickBooks and Xero, which give you very, very, very detailed reports, and any type of report that you want, you can customize and create. So that's kind of what they're used to. So, and with the big corporations that they also work with, they're using big ERP systems, and those systems have that really customized thing as well. So when they come to a smaller scale producer who doesn't necessarily have that, they just want to do what they're used to, which is here's this report that makes it so I don't have to do any work. And a lot of these auditors like legitimately don't realize that that's not the job of the producer. That's their job to validate things. So yeah, I just want that
there's a
advice
huge
to share.
disconnect. I mean, it's like anything. It's like people speaking different languages, right? There's a huge disconnect between what those folks think the reality is, and then the way it actually is. And as a former auditor, not for the CRA but for MNP, there's a lot of people, especially in the accounting industry, who identify as accountants. They have poor communication skills. And we talk about really high level things like revenue recognition. And guess what? Normal people don't understand what that means. And I can't just show up to somebody and go somewhere and go like, what's your revenue recognition policy? They have no idea. I have to break it down and put it in human terms. And that's a big piece that always gets missed when it comes to finance, accounting, tax, all of that stuff.
And one of the best tools I ever use when dealing with auditors and the reviewers, and when they, especially CRA, like every now and then they get a bit belligerent or stuck on something, like they just can't get past something that is actually not an issue or so minor that it doesn't matter. Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Just read up, and if they're pushing beyond what that says they're allowed to do, call the manager and just say, hey, look, Taxpayer Bill of Rights, stop harassing me. Hurry up and process the GST refund. You're being unprofessional and unreasonable. And it works. It just plain works.
Yeah. And just FYI, for anybody who's being audited, inspected as they call it usually in the cannabis CRA world, if you have an auditor that's like not really listening to reason, their internal policy is that if you ask to speak to their supervisor, they have to give you to their supervisor. They're not allowed to do otherwise. So if you really feel like they're just being unreasonable and not listening and asking for things that they shouldn't be asking for, and they're not like seeing that perspective, then just ask to speak to their manager, because it's a waste of your time to try to fight that if they're asking for too much. We had one case once where somebody said no to our customers, and then they brought me on the call, and I kind of made it real clear to them, like, I actually know your policies, and they still refuse. So I just called up their boss, and they let's just say they changed their tune pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
It's worth saying that, yeah, you're growing cannabis, but from the government's perspective, you're just a business. You're like every other business. You just have regulators. So if they're treating you differently because the C word is in your business activities, it shouldn't happen ever. Mm-hmm. It's just, that's what you sell.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of regulators that do have a lot of that stigma too. Like we've sat in on a few different audits from the CRA where just their attitude is, oh, we know you're a criminal, we're going to find it. And that's like really how they're approaching it. Now, I do want to also clarify, because we've been kind of like shitting on the CRA for a little bit here. Most of the auditors there that I have had interactions with have been awesome. Like, they really have been trying to help. They really have been like, oh, you got a lot going on right now. Okay, we take a 2-week extension. We'll help you out in that kind of way, So I don't want to give the sense that it's all bad, but there definitely has been bad experiences too.
Give credit where credit's due, and the excise team, that every single person I've dealt with has been very, very easy to deal with. And when they don't know an answer, they say so, and they go look it up. Different story when it comes to the general departments like GST and collections people. Like they're assholes to everyone that they have to deal with. But the excise guys have been, or the excise team, the women too, everyone has been very helpful and accommodating. But they also say like they're a new department. So like I got a review letter saying, give us everything. Well, they didn't give a due date, so I just sat on it for 2 months before they started calling. Like, well, they didn't give me a due date. I'm not doing it.
Do you guys want to touch on excise regime at all before we shift to questions? I know we're going over time here. Are you guys okay with that?
I wasn't sure. I started typing answers to questions. I wasn't sure how it worked. Sorry.
Well, you could totally answer as well there. Usually the way we work is that we'll have like a 15-minute segment that starts 15 minutes ago around where we actually like say the questions out loud so that people who watch this on YouTube later can also hear the questions. But since we are at time right now, it's been an hour already. Are you three okay to keep going for a bit longer?
I'm good to go, baby. Let's roll.
All right, Luke. I like that attitude.
I do have to head off. I've got a board call, so I'm unfortunately have to go, but appreciate you guys. This has been awesome. And I did get to the question that Michael had there, which was specific for me. But always reach out anywhere. And our website's got a really cool video that you can check out that kind of goes through everything, which will
What is your website? Do you want to say it out loud? Because on YouTube people won't see.
www.habitat.life.
There you go. Thanks, Kayla. Really appreciate your time. And
I
will read the question and answer when we get to the questions, so that all of you on YouTube watching this can hear what Mike West asked and what Kayla responded.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Sami. Thanks for having me. Dan, always a pleasure. See ya.
Bye, Kayla. Dan, are you okay to go a few minutes longer and do exercise duty and then get into questions?
Yeah.
All right. So
I mean, I can only talk about theory, because if you don't get that sales license amendment, there's no excise to talk about.
Well, what do you? Because I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Stand for Craft movement, that people are trying to get that whole regime to change, because it's pretty ludicrous that it's the greater of $1 or 10%, not the lesser of $1 or 10%. What do you guys think? What's your perspective on excise and how that is affecting our industry?
You know, Dan, you mentioned like, oh, if you don't have a sales license, you don't have to worry about it. But the reality is that it's factored in to your sales price, like if you're going B2B, right?
Your processor's sales price.
Yeah.
So what they're going to offer you takes that into account, and you know that it's going to lowball you to oblivion anyways. Yeah. So it matters, but it also doesn't. And being in Alberta, like the rule of thumb is everywhere else is cheaper, tax-wise, everywhere. Alberta is just ludicrous. But
what's their cut? It's not 75 cents.
It's high. It was the provincial rate was created by the NDP government when they were in, and they for the past 20-25 years, Alberta's been pushing the sin taxes up and up and up. So everything's more expensive there, and cannabis was no exception. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Most provinces have established just 7.5% excise
Manitoba is like the cheapest, and
Alberta is 24.3%.
Yeah. And then the other icing on the cake is, if you read AGLC's fine print, if you're selling to AGLC for like, I don't know, $10 a gram, let's say, for easy numbers, and you set that price because you have to pay their fees and excise out of there, and what you're left with is significantly less. They have a little clause that says, well, if you then sell in a cheaper province and you offer them a lower price because you're walking away with the same gross margin because the excise shrinks down a little bit, they will compel you to sell to them at the lower price. So like it's a little gotcha that if they enforce, if you sell in Alberta for $10 a gram and you would make the same amount selling in Manitoba for $9 a gram, you're really exposing yourself to some liability in Alberta with AGLC saying, pay us $1 a gram back. And so like, what do? Like, either you price yourselves out of the consumer market everywhere else but Alberta, or you have a lost leader in Alberta. It's very bizarre.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right? Like, they're like, oh, what is it? It's $1 a gram, no big deal. But when you look at it from a margin perspective and business, like across Canada, across North America, across the world, and what that represents as part of your gross margin, like before you deal with any of your overhead costs, before you pay your employees, before you pay yourself, you got to think about what your margin is. And, this is coming in at like 20%, sometimes 35% of somebody's margin, which is like insane.
It starts to, the issues start to compound. Yeah. So let's say we talked at the beginning about the B2B sales, and let's say you sell to the province, because that's when you're going to have an excise issue. And your excise is going to be due the following month from the sale. So if you sell to the province and then there's a hang up and they take like 6 weeks to pay you because reasons, you recorded the sale, you reported it, you now need to pay the tax on what you haven't even been paid for by the government, but they need to be paid before they pay you. Yeah. Like, just the timing issues are just dumb. And, the way around it would be living in a pretty murky gray world, and you're then just creating a complicated some complicated record keeping with trying to keep things straight of, when's a sale, and if it left here, how is that not a sale, but we have to report it as if it was, or it moved here, but we've got no dollars. And then the next month we have to report the dollars, but no movement of actual inventory. Like, I don't know how they're going to handle it. And I'm not looking forward to having to figure that out myself.
On the plus side, they made changes to the excise on concentrates before that blew up, because initially they were like, oh, $1 per gram of inputs. And it's like, are you joking? Like, imagine if you're making with hemp, right? If you're extracting hemp or low THC stuff, which is typically what's going in there in a lot of ways, so they changed that now, and it's about a penny per milligram of THC content on the inputs, which is okay for now, but they need to keep an eye on it. They really need to keep an eye on it, because there is still potential there for that to be way too high when it comes to what other market factors are out there, right? I mean, if the extractors, like we talked about Valens earlier, talking about folks who are doing this at ginormous scales and are able to benefit from that economy, they're going to be able to make something for such a lower price, and that's going to push everybody else down. And then suddenly the excise taxes for concentrates is another huge issue.
And one discussion that we need to have as a group, when you're talking about craft cannabis and small growers, is we need to have craft cannabis be treated the way micro breweries and the small like the liquor industry treats the small producers. Like, to be in the same tax bracket as Aurora or the giant public companies is insane. Like, they have economy of scale that a craft grower by definition can never reach. And excise is easily going to be the largest or second largest line item on your P&L as a small grower once you're actually at that point. That's ludicrous. And if the government won't or won't even have a discussion about treating the small growers and producers as, and recognize the fact that their costs are not benefiting from economies of scale, and to have the tax reflect that, then the community needs to come together and just make it happen, because we elect people and we can lobby, and there are ways to have a voice. Like we talked a lot about the chambers of commerce and getting more and more people to get engaged in those groups. And the other problem is, well, when do you have time to do that? And it's a struggle, but we got to invest that sooner rather than later, because give it another year, you're going to have more micros who have to pay excise, and then we're all going to wake up and collectively groan at the bill.
And to everybody listening here right now, to change the excise regime, there needs to be an act of parliament. And what that means is, to get this to change, you have to talk to your MP. So if you're listening here right now and you're struggling as a licensed producer because 30% of your gross revenue just goes right to excise tax, and then there is your profit margin, it's completely gone. Or if you are working on a license and you think that's going to be an issue, and let me tell you, you should think that, because it is going to be an issue. Talk to your MP, because they are legally required to represent you and talk to you and take the time of day. And we've talked to two different MPs in the Kootenays, and both of them were appalled by this reality. They've been talking to the finance ministry within the federal government to just understand, and to the health minister, just to understand, like, why is this set up this way, and if enough MPs around Canada actually understand this is the reality, and that businesses are closing. Like Shelter closed down last week. And we had a talk with them. They were in one of the episodes, 4 or 5 episodes ago, and they went in on the excise duty and how much it's affecting them. I feel very confident that if the excise regime was the lesser of $1 or 10%, not the greater of $1 or 10%, that they would not have closed. They would have had healthy profit margins and be just fine right now. So
the other issue with excise is, I'm pretty good with Excel. Most accountants are pretty good with Excel. And the spreadsheet I made to sort of calculate it out is nuts. It's absolutely ludicrous. If you try and follow the rules and all the examples and build a spreadsheet that replicates their examples, look a week or two off.
Yeah.
And even then you don't really trust it. And so if you have to self-calculate and declare how much excise you need to pay. If you're wrong and you're too low, you need to pay the difference and the penalties. If you're wrong and you're too high, haha. You can apply for a refund, but I spoke with the one guy and he's just like, don't bank on it anytime soon.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's not
turnaround
like
time
GST where you can do an amendment or catch it up on the next filing. You're going to get burned. It's dumb.
I think turnaround time on refunds right now is somewhere around 19 months. So,
well, at least I can get a hip faster than that.
So I think takeaways from this conversation, this whole conversation from the beginning till now, talk to your MPs, talk to your MLAs, talk to your Chamber of Commerce. Let's get things changed, and everybody across the country needs to do that for there to be enough pressure to actually make these things change, because it's pretty ludicrous how things are working right now.
And there's great groups out there putting in the work, like your group in the Kootenays. We got the BC Craft Farmers Co-op. Like, who else is out there doing this stuff? Like, get involved.
What's the group that Sarah Campbell started? The micro BC Craft Cannabis Association. I think that's what it is.
Something like that.
Yeah.
One of the other co-founders at Alberta Bud, Tim, he's heavily involved in the ACMLA, which is Alberta Craft Growers. There's two big groups in Alberta, one for retailers and one for growers. There's some pretty heavy hitters in there. The one issue is the more the big LPs are involved, they have much different interests than craft growers.
And they know how to lobby. They understand how to.
Well, they have money and time to do it, and resources. We don't. So we need the only thing we got going for us is numbers. Like unleash the horde, and just be a thorn in the side, like a polite thorn in the side, and eventually we have the right conversation. But like I spoke to my MLA about the challenges with the ATB and the banks in general, and I said, well, Alberta government owns ATB, and yet it won't. Like, they talk about dealing with cannabis companies, but they won't lend. And she said, oh well, I'm not part of the ruling party right now, so I can raise the issue, but I won't get a response. That's a pretty scary answer to get back from an MLA. So you just got to, we need more people from more ridings asking the same questions, so that eventually it goes to the right desk and gets the attention it deserves. Because at the end of the day, it's a legal industry, because there still is an illegal industry, and the government doesn't want that. We don't want that. And we want to be treated like a normal business, heavily regulated, but just like a normal business. And we want to pay our fair share of taxes, but it's a for-profit industry. And if no one's able to make a profit, what's going to happen to the black market?
Yeah.
That's the outcome. If they aren't recognizing the challenges that their own regulations have created. You got all these, the provinces, the Health Canada, CRA, they've designed this framework that is trying to achieve two basic goals, but at the same time, they've got their own initiatives that they're trying to merge, dovetail into that, and it's just created a big monster mess. And because the craft growers were second to the table after the big LPs and the green rush, we're not benefiting from much right now with how it was initially set up.
Yeah.
The sales license amendment process, that's just insanity.
Yeah.
Excise, it's ludicrous. If the government holds a monopoly on provincial distribution, no problem. We do that with liquor, it works. It can work. Sort of. But if they're unwilling to take on new SKUs because you're a new grower and they're like, oh, well, we're busy, COVID, we can't possibly list anything, even if you pay. Well, there's only one buyer. You have to sell to them. And if you can't sell to them because they say, oh, well, higher than normal call volume, try again in 3 months, that's not an acceptable answer for a crown corporation or a government run department. It's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Come on,
You know,
man. There's other buyers out there. You can sell it for 25 cents a gram to an extractor, or maybe get 45 cents.
The offers you can't refuse. Yeah. It's like, hey, now that we got your stuff, we don't want to accept it. Will you take 2 cents a gram instead?
God.
It's like, wait, now it's acceptable?
Right.
All right, guys, let's shift over to the questions here.
Sure.
I'll start off by reading what Mike West asked that Kayla answered, which is just so that our audience on YouTube can hear this. Question for Kayla: as the best aquaponic herb producer, what benefits were seen with the aquaponic methods? Lower cost, more revenue, better production, terp content, etc. And she says, well, this little puppy is a pilot, so very small, but 99.7% water recycled, CO2 recovery, nutrient density, nutrient cost offset, etc. Thanks for that, Mike and Kayla. All right, now I'll ask questions that you guys can answer by talking. Rajdeep asks, how has been your experience with banks and their fees for the cannabis farming accounts? One of my clients is small, and the fees they have been quoted by the financial institutions has been very high and certainly a barrier. We talked about this for a while earlier on, so I feel like we can skip this
There's
question.
something else to add. Is if you talk to FCC, they recognize cannabis
what's
as
FCC?
Farm Credit Canada.
Farm Credit Canada, that's what you said.
So if you know BDC, it's sort of side by side with them. They deal with the farm stuff, BDC deals with everything else. And BDC has said, if you're trying to get like financing for cannabis like cultivation activities, they are scoped out and you have to deal with FCC. Great. FCC is easier to deal with anyways. And BDC is pretty good if they're pretty good. You know, it's 80% of the time, it's 100% great, you know, like that sort of thing. So if you're trying to deal with those institutions, especially with government funding, most of the time you need your bank to participate in the process. Even if the government's guaranteeing a loan like they would with FCC or the various COVID initiatives that have come up in the last couple of years, you need your bank to sign off. Even if the bank has virtually zero risk, the discussions I've had is they're unwilling to take any risk whatsoever because of an internal policy. It's insane, but they just go nope, and then you can't access government funding because you need a financial partner. It's very difficult, and like everyone's been saying in the chat, just like it's a big day if you get a bank account, and that's just a bank account. That's not a credit card. That's not credit. That's nothing. That's just you have a place to park money and trust that it's still there tomorrow. So bank fees, ATB treats you like a normal business until you want money. then you're different. But people have been saying that I've seen the application fees like $2,500 just for them to answer the question of if they will take you as a client, and that's insane. And the answer they give you, I'm like, well, what are you doing? They're like, well, we have due diligence. I said, well, what do you think the licensing process is? If I have a license, the government has already done a security background check on me.
It's taken years, literal years.
All the owners have checked out. And I said, what are you checking that the government hasn't? What value is your due diligence adding to this whole process? And then they said, well, we're a regulator too. I'm like, piss off. You're not a regulator. You're a bank. You think I'm laundering money? What's that based off of other than the C word? And they don't have
it's
answer.
also
They
fairly
say, well,
common. It's also fairly common to have a bank account and think everything's going great, and then to have them show up and be like, we're kind of done with you. Bye-bye. And then suddenly you're out on the curve looking for another one. But there are some solutions out there, okay? So like if you're a cultivator, I think the various divisions of First West Credit Union are fairly open to you. I'll tell you this, man, it is not guaranteed no matter who you're talking to. It is like a job interview when you try to go get a bank account. Don't show up and like, please just put a little bit of effort into like presenting yourself a little bit when you show up at a bank to try and open a bank account. Because if, like you said, they think you're a criminal already, and if they get a whiff of it, off of how you're presenting yourself, then you're toast. But if you go in and you're presenting yourself well, they'll be a bit more open. But so the various divisions of First West, like Island Savings, and I think there's one in the Kootenays, I forget what it's called. They're open to working with cultivators. Processors, I know, have still had a ton of issues getting bank accounts, and so have retailers. And I'm like, are you kidding me, dude? Like the retailers? But I know that they're doing it. ATB you mentioned. What's the one in Ontario? The first one, Altera or something like that. It's possible out there, but there's also some other methods I've seen people use where like they'll get a bank account via a payment processor. So they'll sign up for like online sales. You can't sell online, but they'll sign up for it and they'll pay the fees for it and they'll get a bank account as part of that. It's not great. It's a rough workaround, but if you need a bank account, then that's a way to go. But just keep trying, try everywhere, try credit unions. I mean, they're the most likely ones who are going to work with you to obtain a bank account. Credit is out the window. You're not getting a credit card, you're not getting an LOC until you've really unless you've got a personal, a house that you've paid off and you're willing to give it to the bank as security. Like maybe they'll do it right now, but it's so difficult to get credit. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen for little guys really.
Okay, we're going to do one last question here that has an upvote, which Danny, you just started responding to there, but maybe you can respond in person instead, which is, I'm certainly interested to hear about specifics around accounting strategies and obstacles in the cannabis industry. What are you writing, Dan, that maybe you can parlay into actual words?
Oh, I just had my cursor on there. Let me think.
Oh, sorry. Or Luke, if he just had his cursor on there, do you have any other thoughts?
Have more cash than you think you'll ever need. That's my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of ties into the question that Alex Lau asked as well around IAS 41 and whether or not you have to follow it. The answer is ask your accountant, but unless you are subject to a review engagement or an audit, you don't need to follow either of the guidelines really. You need to follow CRA's guidelines, which is income in, expenses out, taxable income, away you go. So no, you don't have to follow IAS 41 unless there's a statutory requirement or some reason you need to be in IFRS. If you're a private company and you need to follow accounting standards for private enterprises, again, for a review engagement or audit, then yep. You can do those. The accounting standards for private enterprises are a little bit more relaxed, allow a little bit more choice. You can go kind of on a full cost method rather than having to worry about all this fair value shit. I mean, if you look back at I don't look at them anymore. Nobody's popping open Canopy Growth's financial statements. Like none of us are, at least. Who cares, right? But if you go back a little while ago and you look at some of their financial statements, their gross margin was higher than their revenue because of how IAS 41 works, which is stupid. Okay, it's like I sold $100,000. This is what it's saying. I sold $100,000 worth of product, and I made $150,000. Because accounting. So there's talk about a cannabis working group with CPA Canada, and they're looking at how they can adapt the various frameworks to insert cannabis in there, because it's while it is an agricultural product, it doesn't really fit into the same pockets that our historical agricultural products do, like cows, sheep, pigs, plants, like other plants and vegetables and whatnot. It's primarily because of its value, right? If you think about all those things and the costs that it takes to make them, and then the sales price of them, right? Versus a small jar of cannabis, and it's like, yo, that's $40. Versus like a pepper, and it's like, well, there's $2.50, $4 depending on where you are, So it doesn't necessarily fit in there. But for now, really just what you want to be thinking about is, okay, who do I have working in my production? Okay, well, they're a direct cost. When I pay them money, that's me paying to grow cannabis. So that's a cost of my cannabis. And then when I go to sell my product, I need to consider what it took me to get there so that I can sell it for this much and make that much money. You know, I mean, it's really basic accounting stuff that I'm talking about here. I hope it's helpful to somebody out there. But it's important, and understanding, if you can capture all of your costs, and then you've got your yields, how much product you made. Well, your cost per gram, and again, goes into setting your prices and whatnot. And there's loss leaders out there in both the cultivation, processing, and the retail side. I mean, we know the big retail name that's floating around out there that comes in and sells at a loss and undercuts everybody, and you've got stores closing. I'm off on a tangent there. But no, you don't need to follow IAS 41. And like accounting strategies is just do it, dude. It's just get your, sign up for QBO, sign up for Xero. Like Dan said, it's a little bit more user friendly for those of us who aren't accountants. And just start recording, or pay a bookkeeper, something like that. Keep track of it. It's really the best advice I can say.
And Adam, to your questions around this being recorded, it is being recorded. In fact, as soon as we end this event, if you just wait a minute or two, it'll start replaying right away. And we'll also be putting this on YouTube, usually on Monday or Tuesday, so in like 4 or 5 days. On that note, if you are watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. We'd love to have you be able to see all of our content in the future. Luke and Dan and Kayla, even though you're not here anymore, thank you guys so much for being here today. This has been a super eye-opening conversation, actually. There's a lot of things you guys talked about that I'd never really considered from that accounting perspective. And it's super neat to be able to hear that perspective and see just all these things that have a huge impact on small-scale businesses.
Can I give 2 more tips?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Dan mentioned it earlier, so this is totally his win, and it's the GST ITCs. So if you're not recording your costs, you're not capturing the input tax credits that you're spending, and then you're not filing your tax return with the CRA and getting them back in cash.
Hey, Luke, maybe let's take a pause there. Can you explain, in 2 sentences, what ITCs actually are?
It's the GST that you pay on all of your purchases, and you get it back. It's refundable as a business who's registered for GST.
It's refundable if you've paid more GST than you've collected from sales. If you're not unlicensed and just building, you have no collected GST because you're legally not allowed to sell unless you have some other non-cannabis revenue in your business.
And then the other thing is SHRED, scientific research and experimental development. This is not for everybody. There's a scale factor here. It's not ginormous. You don't need to be absolutely huge, but you do need to have some level of scale. And what that is it's at a very high level, very, very high level. It's about 35% of your primarily salary costs, labor costs, for performing various research and development activities. Now, you can fit some interesting things in there, like experimenting with your build, right? Like if you're setting up your facility and you're like, well, let's test it this way, and you do a test there. Well, maybe the cost of paying people to help get it set up is captured under SHRED. Most SHRED preparers aren't going to do it, though, unless there's bang for the buck. And primarily, when they prepare your SHRED return, it's a % fee. And we do it, but it's a % fee. So if your SHRED return is going to be $100,000, well, guess what? We're getting 15 of it just for doing it.
So just to speak to that, because we do file SHRED at CertiCraft, and I write those things up every year with the accountants that we work with. The thing to keep in mind with SHRED is that there has to be what's called technological uncertainty, and what that means is that you don't actually know what the outcome is going to be of what you're trying to do. It's legitimate scientific research done in an industrial context. So don't take Luke's advice to mean, I'm going to get this money through this program. It's very specific in terms of what actually applies. And and SHRED as an organization, they do provide lots of free workshops to learn about what it actually entails. So if you're thinking about this, you think it might apply to you, go attend one of their free workshops to actually understand at a much deeper level what it's all about before assuming that it'll work for your business. Because I've seen lots of companies just be like, oh yeah, we're going to do it, and then be totally off the money with what's actually valid.
Dan, have you guys done it? I mean, I know you have experience with it, but did it AB Bud do it?
For shred, I've done shred for other industries and companies.
Yeah.
It's not hard. Like, they've really changed the process the last couple of years to be more business owner friendly. So there is a more simplified way of doing it that really is not that difficult. Especially if there's a legacy way of doing it, and then there's like you said, the new method, which is basically just you're based on salary. And the hardest part is filling in like the descriptions of what you're doing and why it's shred. But the first time you file it, you're going to get a call from the shred team, and they will be very clear that it's not an audit, it's an educational session, and they want to have an open discussion about what you're doing, and they will help you frame it with a subject matter expert to be a legitimate claim, or they'll tell you no, this doesn't meet the criteria, just your shred's rejected, and for these reasons, and they have been reasonable. It's a bit slow, but they will commit a significant amount of resources to that discussion to help you. And then once you're in, you've kind of got like a copy paste for year to year to update and get your shred claim, and it's all hunky dory after that. Yeah. So it's not an insurmountable barrier, and you don't necessarily need to spend $15,000 if you've got a good accountant who's kind of entrepreneurial and willing to learn if they haven't done shred. Chances are, if you're craft, you're not doing anything too crazy, so it wouldn't be a big stretch to make a claim and roll the dice on getting a big refund. And it's refundable, so even if you haven't paid tax, you will get money from the government for the salaries you actually paid.
Yeah, it doesn't reduce your tax. It is money. It's just money. Here's 30. Here's your percentage of whatever it is that you get. And things like breeding programs can fit in there in certain respects. So if you're out there genotyping, there you go. If you're out there experimenting with cultivars and trying to push the barriers, like a lot of your costs associated with that could be shred claimable. So keep an eye on it. Yeah, for sure. And if you're doing super cool stuff like the folks at Habitat, where Kayla's from, I mean, I bet they're knee deep in it.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time here today. This has been awesome. Next week 2 weeks from now, we got Shannon joining us. She was one of the people who spearheaded the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative and started the Kootenay Cannabis Economic Development Council that I'm part of, that we mentioned earlier. She's also the CEO of a local kind of not literally cooperative, but cooperative oriented model processor here in the Kootenays. It's helping all the outdoor growers in the area actually be able to make margins and succeed here. That's called Antidote, and that's starting up soon here. She was supposed to be our first speaker of this year, but she got COVID and she's good now, and so we've postponed it to 2 weeks from now. She's been in this industry for decades and has a lot of really unique perspectives to bring to the table, so that's going to be a great conversation. Dan and Luke, thank you guys so much. Any last words you guys want to say before we wrap it up here?
It's been my pleasure to be sitting here next to Dan and Kayla, who are out there doing the work and helping build this industry and trying to really succeed, while I get to sit back in my ivory tower and do taxes all day. So thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing everyone again in the future.
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, really fun event here and the podcast, but there's a lot to be said about shared misery, easing the burden and the stress. Like, knowing everyone else is going through a lot of the same, almost identical struggles, it does warm the heart a little bit. It doesn't solve any problems, but at least it's not just you. Yeah. And and even sharing it, like, what we've gone through, it's just never ending. When it rains, it pours, and And when you have a good day or a win, celebrate it, because you might be a dry season for a while before you get your next win.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. And thank you again, Kayla, even though you're not here anymore. Appreciate the energy you brought to the table as well. And I hope everybody here has a fantastic rest of your day. Hope to see many of you in 2 weeks. Ta-ta.
Bye-bye.